What's up, everyone? Welcome once again to the channel. It's your boy, Luis Portelles, and today we are back. We are going to be talking about Miss World 2025, and I'm so excited to be back on this topic because, guys, honestly, for the past couple of days, I have just been waiting for something substantial to happen with Miss World. We did have, I think, one of the challenges, the sports challenge, and that's great, but not so much something that I would like to really analyze. And other than that, we had a couple of daily activities, which is great, but we are now getting to the things that really matter and that, in my opinion, actually have an impact on the outcome of the competition. And of course, I'm talking about the preliminary Beauty with a Purpose presentations. Now, today I decided that I would come here and share with you guys some of the ladies that managed to stand out, in my humble opinion. This is only for episode 1 of the Beauty with a Purpose preliminaries, meaning that this is for the Americas, Caribbean, and Africa as well, regions, continents, whatever you want to call it. So, of course, there will be another episode where I will be covering the ladies of the remaining continent as well. I think that it's coming out as I speak, episode 2. But today we are just focusing on the first batch of delegates because they are quite different from the initial group that I presented during my early favorites in this category. Now, I just want to give you guys a little bit of insight into my selection process because understandably, some of you have very strong feelings about your delegates and you always want me to showcase them and always want me to put them out there and whatnot. But I want you guys to keep this in mind. Whenever I'm analyzing the Beauty with a Purpose presentations, I'm not only just looking at the project, but I am taking it really as a literal presentation. The candidate needs to look the part, the candidate needs to be able to act the part, the candidate needs to have the confidence, the communication skills. It's a whole, it's a package. To me, this is kind of a preview of how the candidate would look like if she was the reigning Miss World and that suddenly she would be on stage discussing with world leaders and whatnot. So taking that into consideration, let's get into my standouts of this very first episode. Remember, this is for Americas, Caribbean, and Africa. So I'm just going to pull out my list right here. Okay. And we're going to go really by continents and regions. The very first candidate that I wanted to talk about, and honestly, I am so happy that I even have the opportunity to do this right now because I haven't talked about her since the beginning of the pageant, is no other than Miss World Canada. Our girl Emma, that has been doing such an incredible job. And honestly, I think that Emma delivers such an incredibly impactful testimony, being the very first Miss World Canada to descend from an indigenous community. For anyone who has lived in Canada or that is remotely familiar with Canada, you know that this is something huge for our country, as historically there is a lot of discrimination, so many different injustices that have been subjected to the indigenous communities in the country. So to have someone like Emma who is able to present herself in such an eloquent, respectful, she has that the diplomatic touch to talk about these subjects, and most importantly, she comes from a place of experience. So I think that she is doing an incredible job. I like the fact that she's not only someone who can talk about the struggles, but someone that has been able to endure some of those things herself, and also who has seen the impact of the oppression on the people directly around her. And honestly, for anyone who has been following Emma's journey since the beginning, you know that she is one of the few candidates that has literally been waiting for this moment for years. I mean, Emma was crowned, I think it's like 3-4 years ago. So I'm really happy to see that she managed to excel in, the daily activities, the sports challenge, now in the Beauty with a Purpose challenge. Girl, you're doing an incredible job. I'm so proud of you, and please just keep it coming. All right. So now I would like to talk about another delegate, of course, from Latin America. This time is about Miss World Venezuela. And I am going to say that she was just simply incredible from A to Z. She was incredible. And it is just so wild to me that she is one of those delegates that since the very moment that she was crowned, that she was selected to go and represent Venezuela at Miss World, she's one of the delegates that was heavily bashed. So many hateful comments and people saying that she was not the prototype, that she didn't look the part, or that she was not the standard of what Venezuela will normally send to Miss World. But every single thing that I see on this woman so far has been stunning, like truly breathtaking, from the looks up to the way that she speaks, the eloquence, the clarity. She has so much grace. She's very regal. I said in my previous video that she kind of looks like an actress from the silver screen. So I think that not only she fits the mold of Miss World very well in terms of the looks and the appearance, but also just the way that she carries herself is very Miss World-like. for me. So personally, I'm very, very happy with her project and with her presentation. But honestly, great job. I really love it. Keep it coming, girl. Now let's move on to a candidate from the Caribbean region, and that is, of course, Miss World Jamaica. She honestly, what I like the most about her presentation is that she has such a calming and reassuring presence. Her energy is very positive and uplifting, and it also perfectly complements her beauty and her elegance. I love the way that she was dressed for the occasion. I love the hair. I love the makeup. I love just how elegant, still professional the outfit was. In her testimony for her Beauty with a Purpose project, she was talking about being a survivor of domestic violence in her household. And now she is, of course, using the Miss World platform to tell her story. Not only her story, but also the story of her mom and her grandma, who she did mention within her video that they were kind of a huge inspiration in her life, and that had, of course, a big part in who she is and who she has become since she was a child. She mentioned that unfortunately she did grow up in a home where abuse was the norm, and I think that no one should have to go through that. So having those traumatic experiences, she has now used this newfound platform through the Miss World organization, implementing some workshops, of course, some healing workshops in Jamaica. She takes her advocacy to the media. She goes to marches, and the overall purpose of this is simply to raise her voice and lend it to those who cannot speak for themselves and who might be in a similar situation as of right now. Simply put, she mentions that her mission in life is to create a world where every woman can speak up, no matter the odds. Now, wait, hold on. I'm going to talk about a delegate that I got so many comments about her on my last video because, well, she was not there on my last video. And I'm talking about Miss World Puerto Rico. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. I mean, honestly, I did notice her when I was making my initial video. I really just wanted to stick to like 15 delegates in that particular video. Otherwise, it gets a little bit too lengthy and it's too boring and whatnot. But trust me, I see the vision. I see where you guys are coming from. And all I'm going to say for Miss Puerto Rico is, wow, my God. She completely captivated me. She had my attention. She had my eyes from the first moment that I saw her delivering her speech. Honestly, I think that in terms of the look, of course, she manages to stand out from everyone else with the red curls, the porcelain skin. You just simply cannot take your eyes off her. But beyond the look, I also thought, especially during this particular presentation, that she was very charismatic, she was eloquent, she was poised. You know, that's something that, if I'm being honest, I got to see a little bit more of as of right now, because before I was seeing like the daily looks and whatnot, what people are posting about her in terms of her outfits and all of those things. But now, when you get to see her in motion, hear her speak, see that she is charismatic, that she's likable, that she makes sense, it honestly makes a huge difference. In her presentation, she mentioned that she is a teacher in Puerto Rico's public school system. She was able to address, the need for education and what she does within her community. Her delivery, as I was mentioning earlier, was very calm, clear, deliberate, honestly perfect for a Miss World contestant and perhaps for a future queen as well. She never sounded rushed, and she never lost track of the conversation, going as far as sometimes taking a couple of breaks, making small pauses within the delivery without necessarily creating awkward silences. So that was very impressive. Her Beauty with a Purpose project on functional diversity was inspired by her cousin Joselito, who has a Down syndrome. Overall, honestly, she was one of the most memorable and strongest presentations from the Americas. So those were a couple of the things that I wrote down on my notes. And I would like to say that, yes, of course, before I saw the looks and the standouts and all of that, now when you combine all of those, appearances and facades with the substance, the eloquence, and just the likability, Puerto Rico, you're going places. All right. The last candidate that I want to address within the Americas is going to be Miss Brazil. Yes, and I was able to talk about her on my very initial video when I said that, my God, the look, she just looks angelic and straight out of, like a painting. I really see the vision here, and I think that she's still a very strong contender for Miss World. But, here I will just like for this particular presentation to highlight it once again. Her beauty, her eloquence, and the way that she presented, everything felt effortless. Of course, Beauty with a Purpose, she tackled a couple of serious issues with an energy that was still light and uplifting. And I think that's something impressive. That's not an easy feat, because when you're talking about all of these complex, heavy, sometimes sad topics, it's hard to remain hopeful and positive and still give light energy to others. As I mentioned before, she is one of those girls that comes as well from the Miss Earth system. So I believe that perhaps this might have trained her to speak publicly, as we know that Miss Earth is heavily focused on advocacy and presentation and just defending Mother Nature. Her Beauty with a Purpose, more precisely, focuses on a shelter that not only provides food and support, but also education. The kind of education that equips people with real life skills to break the cycle of poverty. So it's not just about giving food or giving certain items, of course, which is already helpful. And a lot of girls do that for their projects. Nothing wrong with it, but actually give them skills that would allow them to provide for themselves and to hopefully in the future change their situation. So it's all about long-term transformation, not just aid. I think that's the most important part. And personally, I admire that deeply. So Miss Brazil, you have my support. Now let's move on. Let's shift completely to a whole different continent. And honestly, before I even get into this, I'm going to tell you, so far, I think that Africa has the strongest batch of delegates in terms of their presentations, in terms of their Beauty with a Purpose projects, in terms of, just the overall caliber of contestants this year at Miss World is out of this world, and no pun intended, which honestly is very surprising to me, considering that, Africa consistently sends high caliber quality girls to Miss World. And I was reading somewhere that, it has only happened once in history that Miss World crowned a woman of color from Africa. So I think that perhaps this year might be the year that we might have another queen of color from Africa. So let's dig into the girls that, in my opinion, stood out within the continent. First, I would like to talk about Miss Zimbabwe, Miss World Zimbabwe, of course. I wrote down in my notes that her looks was so fitting. It felt like she was about to dress the United Nations. And why I think this is important is, as I said in the beginning of the video, it's not just about your project or how you deliver it. You need to look the part. Here, you're basically giving the judges and Julia herself a glimpse of who you are and what you can deliver as a potential Miss World. And I think that Miss Zimbabwe truly understood the assignment. She was eloquent, charismatic, and truly easy to listen to. And that's also an underrated thing because, as I said, sometimes these topics are complex. You cannot just simply break it down to people and hopefully get them to understand fully the problem within a couple of minutes. But she managed to stay consistent in terms of the substance of her message while also making it easy and accessible for everyone. You can tell that she does have pageant experience, likely sharpened, of course, during her time at Miss Earth. She is another one of the alumni of Miss Earth that this year decided to join Miss World. So I'm very happy to see the girls just thriving in their pageant careers. Her focus for her Beauty with a Purpose project was mostly on the mental health part of things, but particularly mental health within underserved communities and more precisely within developing nations, of course, where sometimes, because it's still a developing country or there are bigger issues, the tools and the resources for mental health are simply not there or sometimes are simply limited. So I thought that her approach to it was very refreshing, as sometimes the whole mental health conversation has become kind of a stereotypical conversation in the pageant world, but she managed to find a relevant and very impressive angle, in my opinion. So it was a very needed and timely message. So good job, Miss Zimbabwe. Let's talk about Miss Zambia. All right. I've seen a lot of comments for Zambia. So many people were tagging me in her video. And after reviewing all of this batch, I can very confidently say that Miss World Zambia looked like a leader. And I'm going to start once again from there because I think that the look does make or break. I mean, I just thought not only that she looked like a leader in terms of being so serious, so structured, but also it was pageant. It was fun. There's a little bit of, sparkle here and there, but still given the vibes that needed to be giving. Her delivery was absolutely stunning and commending, which I think is very important. This was Zambia's return to Miss World after 7 years. At least this is what she mentioned during her speech. And honestly, I think that she made this moment count. Like those 7 years, Zambia, you are so back at Miss World because this queen managed to truly deliver a great presentation. She spoke passionately about education and was inspired by a loved one to go on about this topic. She was open and vulnerable enough to address deeply personal topics like early marriage and rape within her presentation, but she managed to do so with a lot of composure, emotional intelligence, which I think is commendable, right? Because, I mean, whenever you go through such a traumatic experience, it would be so easy to break down and not be able to communicate your ideas or not be able to really even touch this topic. But I think that it was truly impressive the way that she was able to carry such a heavy conversation and do it in such a commanding, such a compassionate way, not only for her story, but also for the victims, people who are going or might be going through a similar situation like hers. She managed to keep her message impactful without becoming necessarily overwhelmed. I guess that's the point that I am trying to make, and overall, truly commendable. So Zambia, as I said, after 7 years, Zambia is so back at Miss World, and honestly, one of my favorite presentations of the night. Congratulations. I want to talk about Miss Namibia. All right, Miss Namibia was actually not within my first video that I made about the early favorites, but honestly, she is one of those girls that I had really up there, and I'm happy that I get to talk about her here in the Beauty with a Purpose presentation, which honestly, I think is even more important than the early favorites type of videos. I was honestly just simply moved by her presence. She carried herself with a lot of elegance and composure. She began her whole speech by acknowledging the privilege that she has in just simply being able to pursue her dreams. I love the fact that she started by mentioning, kind of like her accomplishments, the things that she has been able to do, how she has been able to chase her dreams and be successful. Of course, she didn't address it within this speech because she's at Miss World, but she is a delegate who has been able to represent Namibia before at Miss Universe. So this is someone with experience, with a background, someone that has been around and that knows what she's talking about. And then she completely shifted and said that her life and the things that she has been able to do is something that her ancestors could only have dreamt of. And that just kind of hit me for a moment, because sometimes we take our privilege and the things that we are doing right now for granted and think that sometimes a couple generations back, sometimes even as near as our parents, could only dream of living the life that we get to live. I think that it was really remarkable, the fact that she knew that she was in such a bubble in Namibia, the fact that she had so much privilege, but that if she was able to get out of that bubble, her reality wasn't necessarily everyone's reality. So in a way, she never lost sight of the inequalities that still exist up until this day around her. So she decided to use, of course, her pageant platform, not just as Miss World, but coming from Miss Universe and everything. She's using her platform to empower others with practical skills that can feed the families, that can create income, that can simply change lives. Her Beauty with a Purpose project is about empowerment through action, and I found that incredibly inspiring. So I think that it's kind of a similar example to what I was mentioning before in another one of the delegates as well, who was actually teaching skills and things that could help change the lives of these people, not just simply giving aid as in like the form of money or food, but actually teaching them how to provide it, how to create that for themselves. So very good. Now let's talk about Miss World Nigeria. And listen up, because in my first video, when I was talking about the delegates that stood out in my opinion and whatnot, I got so many comments about Nigeria. And then I saw like pageant fans fighting in the comment section saying, how can you expect Nigeria to be there? She was appointed last minute because there were some changes in the national representative. And then she got to Miss World late and this and that. But honestly, I knew that you can't simply judge a pageant contestant based on these things. And I think that this presentation with the Beauty with a Purpose segment is a perfect example that you cannot underestimate what she has to deliver just based on the timeline of her process. Miss Nigeria talked about the fact that she's helping children across Nigeria to access quality education and also simultaneously educating women about maternal health. Her delivery, I will describe it as in it was firm, it was powerful, and it was unforgettable. I think that there were other delegates within this batch that managed to be a little bit more on the softer side, who managed to say a little bit more uplifting. And I don't know, the energy was a little bit different with Miss Nigeria. It was a little bit more powerful, straight to the point. And I think that unforgettable is really the word to describe it. She shared her story in a way that was very touching, because she went into details about how she lost her mother due to the lack of accessible healthcare in Nigeria at the time. So this is, of course, a heartbreaking reality, like a very emotive experience that she will carry for the rest of her life, of course. But again, through this platform, through the Beauty with a Purpose initiative, someday she is trying as much as she possibly can to make a difference, to have an impact within the communities, and perhaps change the future of the children in the country through the education, but also hopefully protect the mothers and give them the resources that they need, the tools, the knowledge that they need in order to take care of themselves, and hopefully another child doesn't have to grow up without their mothers. So as I said, at this point, we don't care about timelines. I care about substance. I care about communication skills, about presence, and all of those things Miss Nigeria was able to present during this particular round. So again, one of the standouts of the night, in my humble opinion. Now, we still have 3 more delegates that I would like to talk about. I think that the first one that I will go into will be Miss Sierra Leone. And here within my notes, I wrote, her delivery was simply powerful. It was clear. It was deeply emotional. She wasn't just telling a story. She was living the story in the sense that she was very generous with the details, the things that she was describing about hunger and just going through so many hardships in order to make it where she is or to simply follow her dreams. She realized that, sometimes it's not that you don't have hope, or that sometimes it's not that you don't have ambitions. Sometimes it's that the reality and the context around you is keeping you from chasing those things. And in her case, it was the hunger. That experience shaped her and made her want to collaborate with certain organizations, national and international initiatives that could help address this issue. So in a way, she presented herself initially through the storytelling as a victim of the hunger, but eventually she turned into an advocate, and her transformation is truly inspiring because there's no one who can change the world more than someone who knows what they're talking about, who has been through it, and that knows the consequences of such an experience. So what I like the most about her presentation is that she was able to connect with the audience. I mean, I'm the audience in this case. We are the audience in such a personal and honest way that most people will simply be maybe shy to share that they went through, necessity, or that they were hungry at some point in their lives. It wasn't about performance for Miss Sierra Leone. It was about the truth. And that is simply what I got from this experience. Her conviction honestly just left a mark on my heart, and hopefully also in the hearts of everyone who was listening to her presentation. Now, let's talk about perhaps the favorite of the night, and that has to be, of course, Miss World Somalia. I just shared a clip about her speech on my social pages, on my Facebook, on my Instagram, because I think honestly, it was one of those projects that you just couldn't overlook in terms of the impact of it, the message of it, just how moving it was, and the way that she was able to present it. Her story, I will say that is without a doubt one of the most touching stories that I've been able to witness, to hear about in this entire Beauty with a Purpose presentation series, not just at Miss World 2025, but in previous editions as well. I think that rarely we have seen someone who went through something so drastic and that has made it to this point where she's able to talk about it so openly. So she spoke from the heart as a survivor of female genital mutilation, in other words, female circumcision. This isn't just a topic for her, it's a personal fight, because she described in details how the whole process was, circumcision, the mutilation, no anesthesia, no pain relief, the whole thing. So I encourage you guys to go and watch it by yourself if it's not such a strong topic that you can handle, So I encourage you all to go and check it out because it's extremely inspiring. She now worked relentlessly to protect other women from enduring the same trauma that she had to go through, which I think is great, very inspiring, and the whole purpose of Beauty with a Purpose. You could tell that during her speech, the room was visibly moved. And the thing is, we couldn't even see the whole room. We could just see her, but just based on the energy, the audio, you could tell that all the girls there were pretty moved by it, including Julia Morley, who eventually joined her on stage in solidarity, just wanted to support her, just be there for her, as she was clearly moved to tears by her testimony. And I will say that honestly, it was very hard for anyone else before or after to simply just match the intensity of the story and just the overall impact and emotional baggage that came with it. So Miss Somalia by far was the standout of Beauty with a Purpose for this first episode. Lastly, I wanted to go ahead and give a shout out to Miss World South Africa. And I'm gonna be really honest with you guys. You know that she is, for a lot of people, the favorite to win the Miss World crown, at least prior to the beginning of the competition, because now everyone is stepping it up. And I'll be really honest, I was really shocked when I learned about her age. I made my last video when I was talking about the favorites and whatnot. So of course I did some digging and some research. And when I found out she's only 19 years old, I thought, oh my God, this girl is so graceful and so composed. I assumed that, I mean, she must have been at least in her mid 20s or something like that. And I mean that as a compliment in every way that I can possibly, present it. And I'm also going to say that I was very inspired that she was able to pull through and deliver such an impactful presentation for her Beauty with a Purpose cause, especially considering that she was the next one right after the very emotionally intense presentation of Miss World Somalia. I think that Miss South Africa was able to hold her own with strength and poise. Her Beauty with a Purpose project focuses on the orphans and the fact that she's working with certain organizations to provide them with an education and the foundational support that they will need in order to thrive later on in life. I thought that her message was thoughtful. Her delivery was strong, but still keeping that very soft, very delicate aura essence that she is kind of attached to at the moment. And I would say, she was a queen in every sense of the word. So I also think that she was able to stand her own ground. I mean, considering that she was after Miss Somalia, as I said earlier, and also that she is one of the youngest delegates of this entire batch. So everyone, that pretty much concludes it for me when it comes to episode 1 of the preliminary competition of Beauty with a Purpose for Miss World 2025. I know for a fact that some of you guys will tell me down below, my candidate is in that order. There's honestly, everyone did a great job. As I said, I'm kind of trying to stick to my criteria of not just the project, but the delivery, the communication skills, the look, the presence, the confidence. So those were pretty much the things that I was looking at for this particular round. So you guys go ahead, do your thing. Let me know down below. What do you think about my comments, my picks and whatnot? And stay tuned because tomorrow I will be uploading as well my picks, my favorites for the second episode, which covers, I think it's Europe, Asia, and Oceania, something like that. So yeah, I'll be back with more predictions, not predictions, but like my favorites for the Beauty with a Purpose preliminaries. So thank you for watching. See you on the next one. Bye, y'all.